Welcome everyone. I wanted to share with you an excerpt from my book on Heidegger, but it's also an excerpt from my course on Heidegger on the question of being. So this is a short 15-minute or so part of one of the lectures. And if you'd like to get access to the entire course, then just follow the link in the description of the video. In this lecture, I delve into Heidegger's diagnosis of language and the danger of language, but also language as the house of being. Thank you very much. Because it is in his writings on language specifically that his thinking really culminates, so it's necessary to delve into language more deeply. You can see here it all striding together. First, the danger of language. The danger of Gestell, of positionality, is Nachstellen, which is the resentful chasing after and imitation of beings. By chasing and imitating, being sets itself into its unessence. The same pertains to language. The threat to and of language comes from language itself. Recognizing the danger of language does not do away with that danger either. There is no essence without unessence. There is no fourfold without positionality. There is no language without danger. There is no saving power without danger. To speak of the danger of language is to indicate that this danger comes from language itself. And how is a language a danger to us and itself? It's precisely death as the concentration of concealment, the refuge and shrine, the refuge of being and the shrine of nothing, that structures and permeates the danger of language. In his lecture course on Hölderlin, Heidegger explicates the poet's insight that language, quote, is the most dangerous of goods given to man, who is the destroying and perishing and recurring creature, as Hölderlin says. Heidegger reads this as saying that language is, quote, the danger of all dangers because it first creates the possibility of danger. Heidegger continues, danger is the threat that beings pose to being itself. Danger thus means that we forget being because of the prevalence of beings. Language is the most dangerous good because language appears to address beings and beings only. And language is what lets us reify beings in their beingness. Or language itself can be reified as made up of word things and a naive realism, for example. The problem is precisely that language discloses beings as beings, and we, of course, need that disclosure as we necessarily are in the world. But at the same time, this disclosure of beings covers over being. Heidegger, however, sees another possibility to disclose beings through language, so that beings do not block being. For Heidegger, the thinking of the essential event depicts a possibility to say out of being or from within being directly, because, as exemplified by the very word Ereignis in the unfolding passage, this saying is a non-propositional and non-representational saying. This saying and thinking of the simplicity, or even poverty, of being discloses at once the true richness of beings, because it lets beings be. Yet also being itself, for its very abyss, essentially occurs as danger. For Heidegger, the word is, this tiny little word, harbors the entire fate of being. In any sayings, or sendings of being, of course also, in any saying of the tiny word is, there sways the fissure of being, and thus the off-ground, the self-differentiation of being, where being means that beings are, at once opens an abyss because beings are unfounded. But being can also meaning can also collapse. Meaning is fragile. Even where speaking lets something appear of itself as that which this something is, this letting appear always at once covers over. Death as refuge, enshrine, structures these occurrings. Language is its own greatest danger, precisely because of language's relationship with death, which death as Gebirg, as the concentration of concealment, sheltering, harboring, is also the locus of concealing concealment, and thus of the breakdown of meaning. Any entbergen also means to unshelter. Any disclosure is also an unsheltering, therefore a setting at risk of something. Language then exposes itself to danger because, from Heidegger, again the word never offers any immediate guarantee as to whether it is an essential word or a deception. Yet this is not primarily due to human erring or a failure in the human capacity or so, because language itself speaks itself. Language is, as James Dembski puts it in his study on death in Heidegger, quote, not primarily a human instrument, but rather a mode of the self-revelation of being. That language speaks us shows itself in the automated speech of the everyday. For example, in the idiomatic expressions which we use without having to think. To a certain degree, language must be automatic, because this is how language can structure the everyday world in a reliable and therefore also meaningful way. Yet this is also precisely where language, as we know from being in time, that the fallenness to the world is not some sinful state or so, but that's the immersedness in the world is also Dasein's fallenness to the world. So this is also precisely then where language can at once also become harmful, because in so doing, in structuring the world in this manner, language covers over deeper goings-on, occurrings. Quote from Heidegger again, language must constantly place itself into the illusion which it engenders by itself, and so endanger what is most its own genuine utterance. In everyday communication, language necessarily places itself into an illusion. What illusion or what seeming? The illusion that language is first and foremost expression of the contents of the soul or today of personal will and one's psychological makeup. The illusion that language addresses beings and only beings. The illusion that language is but communication and transmitter of information. The illusion that language itself is made up of word things, and the illusion, as Heidegger puts it, in überlieferte Sprache und technische Sprache, traditional language and technical language. I would prefer the translation of delivered language and technical language. Überliefert is stronger than traditional. That language is first and foremost a system of signs and ciphers. That's an illusion, a seeming, a shining. Heidegger, however, determines primordial language as a saying that lets something appear and that lets something show itself from itself. The German word for showing is zeigen. A derivative mode of showing is the sign, which in German is Zeichen. You can hear it's a softer sound than zeigen, but they are related. Zeichen is a cipher or a marker which signifies something specific, but which does so in such a way that what the sign points to is predetermined. There's a format that's preformatted, and precisely a priori in this sense does not show itself from itself. There is no original saying here, thanks to the Boolean variable. Computers and informational technology precisely work by reducing the fundamental question of why there is something rather than nothing, of what is and what is not, to the signs yes and no, or even more simply, 1 and 0. The Seinsfrage is reduced to the simple but far-reaching answers: everything exists, nothing exists. 1 and 0. This is the bastardization of the metaphysical question, why is there something rather than nothing? And in fact, the question doesn't even show up anymore. But there are simply two answers to it, and they are used as variables. Their constant interplay now drives the codes of the algorithms that are the makeup of the technological world. The reduction of language in the information age, as Heidegger points out in traditional language and technical language, is caused by Gestell, by positionality, but also by the way in which human beings co-respond to the challenges of technology. Heidegger's examples are, in this regard, the news, reporting, and journalism. Information is supposed to be clear, unambiguous, and fast. Hence, the technological age must work to disambiguate the meaning of words so that information can instantly and ever faster reach human beings everywhere. In this way, information supposedly allows the subject to be everywhere at the same time, scattered all over the world, with the world reduced to the subject's representations. Technical language is a reduction of language, but it's already, to a certain degree you can see that there's already something creeping in, right, with this chit-chat, this vain, idle talk about fake news and misinformation, etc., etc. What this indicates to anyone who can still think is that it, even to the functionaries of the information age, they can't admit it, of course, but that information itself is a negative signifier and therefore is always actually absent. And this absence is now beginning to spit. There is no universal receiver of the so-called information. This mad, fanatic fantasy is about to collapse. And hence you get to these phenomena. In this way, information allows the subject to be everywhere at the same time, right? So the technical language is a reduction of language, and therefore of human existence and of nature. The technical language is a self-reduction of language, and its aim to, quote, relegate, and this is from the Nietzsche book in Heidegger, the aim is to relegate the animated, vigorous word to the immobility of a univocal, mechanically programmed sequence of signs. This would mean the death of language and the Vereisung, the petrification and devastation of Dasein. A way out of that is poetic language. Also, Mandelstam is a kindred spirit of Heidegger in this regard. And there is a crucial passage, and there are many of them, of course, in Mandelstam's Conversations about Dante, that perhaps helps us better understand Heidegger's insight into the threat that language posits to itself. This is Mandelstam speaking. Any given word is a bundle of rays, and meaning sticks out of the word in various directions, not aspiring toward any single official point. In pronouncing the word sun, we are, as it were, undertaking an enormous journey to which we are so accustomed that we travel it in our sleep. What distinguishes poetry from automatic speech is that it rouses us and shakes us into the wakefulness in the middle of a word, into the center of the word. Then it turns out that the word is much longer than we thought, and we remember to speak. And remember that to speak means to be forever on the path. Mandelstam understands the word as a bundle of rays, not a sign. To say the word sun, a word we might use daily, when is the sunrise, when is sunset, which can be pre-calculated and we can structure our day around it. That's not a linear process, though, to say the word sun. There is no word object that simply means or directly refers to some concrete object out there that is already given as that very object. To say the word sun for Mandelstam takes us on a journey to the sun, on a long yet now ordinary and concealed path, and discloses the sun anew every day through poetry. The fundamental motion is not one of correspondence, but here this is exactly what one shouldn't say too much, but hear it again. To say the word sun in a poetic way, so that it discloses of the sun to us. We are traveling to the sun. We are traveling to the sun. I can't say it, even say it even more explicitly, it evaporates. So, but perhaps listen. The fundamental motion is not one of correspondence in the ordinary non-Heideggerian sense of correspondence, exclusively between the word, object, or signifier, sun, and the object or signified sun. Sun is hence not some contingent sign for some object which we arbitrarily refer to as sun. When we say sun, we travel to the sun itself. To the sun itself. And the sun travels towards us. Saying the word is not an isolated event. It's very important also, I think, that he uses the example of the sun. But through us saying, the history of the word, and the very mother tongue to which it belongs, is moved and moves through the word. In the essay, the essence of language, das Wesen der Sprache, which I think would be better translated as the realm of language. This is where Heidegger quotes a line from Hölderlin that is similar to Mandelstam. It's reminiscent of, that Mandelstam is a reminiscence of. Hölderlin says, words are like flowers, or words like flowers. Heidegger says that this constitutes the bringing forth of the word from its inception. In the dialogue with the Japanese scholar, Heidegger and his interlocutor determine words based on the Japanese term for language, kotoba, as petals. If words are flowers and petals, then words blossom and flourish. They spring from an opening bud and are at once under threat of death. In fact, it's when they come into bloom that their death is present already, but at once with their full bloom.